So I wanted to talk about something I went through recently. I was out in Germany with a band that I do sound for live, and I burst my left eardrum. Obviously, as a sound engineer, not something you want to go through at all. Most people, you don't really want to experience a burst eardrum. It's not a fun thing to go through. If you have been through it, you'll know what I'm on about. It's different for everybody depending on the extent of the damage, but yeah, not a fun experience to go through. As a sound engineer and somebody who's self-employed, it's quite a scary thing to go through when faced with the reality that you could maybe have possible long-term hearing damage. Even in the short term, I have some savings set aside for situations like this, but that's only going to see me through really like a month maximum. So being faced with being out of work for an indefinite period of time, it's quite a scary proposition. So I wanted to talk a little bit about this experience that I went through and tell my story. And hopefully, if any of you have been through anything similar or are going through anything similar, hearing my story will just be something to relate to and hopefully find a little bit of solace in. If you've never experienced anything like this, then that's great, and hopefully you never will. But hopefully you enjoy my tale of woe. So yeah, I was out in Germany with the band Airloo from Nottingham, UK, which is where I'm from. They're a band that I've done sound for some time now. Lovely bunch of people and just a great band. So go check them out if you're into your kind of post-rock, cinematic, shoegazy kind of stuff. We were going to do this festival in Germany and I was excited to get out on the road with them. A couple of days prior to doing this festival, this ear had started to feel a little bit blocked up. My initial reaction was, I just had a bit of a wax build up or something. I think most of us have had blocked up ear at some point or another due to wax build up. It's definitely an annoying sensation and it's irritating if you're relying on your hearing to do work or, whatever it is you might be doing. But I kind of feel like you can deal with it and you can work around it. It's not the worst thing in the world in terms of being a sound engineer or, a musician or anything like that. In the studio doing mixing work, I do tend to avoid that if I've got a blocked up ear. Live sound, I feel like I can kind of manage that, primarily because live sound, I feel like you're dealing with the broader strokes. If you imagine it like painting a picture, you're dealing with the broader strokes more, whereas in the studio crafting a mix, you're dealing with the kind of nitty-gritty more, the finer details and really finessing those details because you're trying to fit a mix in a stereo field that's going to play back nicely on any variety of speaker systems. So, from your smallest speakers and your headphones and earbuds to larger scale PA systems, whereas with live sound, you're mixing on these big PA systems that are full range. You're only mixing to that particular system and space that you're in. It's kind of, I wouldn't say it's easier necessarily. They're very different things, but yeah, I feel like I can kind of more comfortably deal with a bit of an ear blockage doing a live sound. Recording in the studio, I'd kind of feel okay with that and I'll still do stuff like that. But yeah, it was something that I felt like, okay, I can cope with this. And with any luck, by the time we get to the festival and we do the show, my ears unblocked anyway. Unfortunately, it didn't pan out that way. It was kind of a worst case scenario in the end. So when we got to the Airbnb we were staying at, this was the night before doing the festival, I was trying to get to sleep, lying down, and I started to feel a lot of sharp pain, not pleasant at all. And the only way I can describe it is there started to be this like intense pressure where it felt like the inside of my ear was just like pushing outwards, and then that kind of went on for a few minutes. Then that pressure just sort of very suddenly went, which I now know in hindsight was my eardrum. That was the moment it burst. There was no discharge or anything that came from my ear. There was some bleeding, which I think is normally the case with a burst eardrum. That was just all inside my ear, and it only came out later as kind of dried blood along with earwax as my eardrum started healing. With there being no discharge, with discharge, if you don't know, that usually kind of indicates some kind of infection. I really don't know what it was that caused my eardrum to burst. The doctors don't really know. When this is getting ahead a bit, but when I eventually went to see the doctors when I got back home, they kind of asked if I'd poked anything in my ears, if I've been trying to clean my ears with Q-tips, which, sometimes people do manage to perforate their eardrum by poking around in their ears, trying to clean their ears. I always say to people, don't use Q-tips or anything to clean your ears. Your ears are self-cleaning. If you have blocked up ears, if it goes on for more than a week, normally I will use some like off-the-counter eardrops or something, and they're generally pretty safe to use. You know, they just help soften any hard wax that's blocking your ear canal, and then that wax can work its way out of your ear. In really bad cases with earwax blockages, syringing your ears is something that can be done. I know in the UK a lot of doctors won't do it anymore, as there is more risk with that of damaging the eardrum. The ear canal in itself, like the tissue in there, is very sensitive tissue, and yeah, anything that might irritate that could increase risk of infection and stuff like that. So it's generally just let your ears do their own thing and clean themselves. But yeah, in this case with the burst eardrum, I didn't know whether it was infection. In hindsight, looking back now, I feel like at the time I was feeling very stressed, overwhelmed. I felt like I had too much on my plate. I'd taken on too much work, definitely, just on a personal level. There was stuff going on in my life that, yeah, I just generally wasn't in a very good place mentally and feeling pretty run down in general. And I do wonder if it was my body's way of telling me to slow down, which if it was my body telling me in the worst possible way. But I kind of like to look at it that way. That's kind of a positive spin to put on the whole situation, to look at it as a way of my body telling me to slow down and take stock, which I'll get to later, like some of the sort of realizations that led me to, which I'd see as a positive outcome of the whole thing. But yeah, whether it's infection or just stress or whatever it might be, my eardrum burst. I knew after it happened, okay, something's clearly happened here, something's gone wrong. I didn't know it was necessarily a burst eardrum at the time, but it was the middle of the night. Everybody else was either asleep or trying to get to sleep, so I can't do anything about it now, so let's just try and get some sleep and see how I am in the morning. In the morning, unfortunately, I wasn't any better. My ear felt like I had this sensation of fullness, felt like really blocked up or something. Tried putting some earbuds in and listening to music, and I noticed straight away my hearing was fine in this ear, but in this ear, everything was really muffled, and it was kind of like maybe like 3 kilohertz and above just wasn't there, which is pretty scary. I couldn't do anything about it in that situation. Panicking about it is not going to help in terms of recovery, but yeah, there's that worry. Is this permanent hearing loss, or is this just a temporary thing? But when everybody else was up, I said to the guys, look, I don't think I'm going to be able to do sound for you today for the festival, because this happened last night and I can't hear properly in this ear. And, I don't feel safe to be around loud noise either. I don't think that's a wise move in case it is a burst eardrum and I have done some kind of damage here. I still in my mind thought it might just be some kind of ear blockage. And the band were really cool about it, showed a lot of concern and were very supportive and agreed it wasn't best for me to go and mix for show. We kind of decided collectively that it would still be a good idea for me to go along with them, talk to the house technician for that festival stage they were doing, just give them some pointers, basically say that I wasn't going to be able to mix for show and give them some pointers on how I'd do the mix. There's a lot of stuff like quite specific reverb on the vocals and drums. It's all very atmospheric, and I tried to make the mix sound as big as possible. So I gave the house tech some pointers, helped the band set up on stage, and just did what I could outside of actually mixing the show to just try and make things go as smoothly as they could for the band, and make sure they had as good a time as possible. Unfortunately, as soon as we got to the festival site, we were kind of nearing the stage they were playing, which was in a big tent, and I could hear a band sound checking. The kick drum was going over the PA system, and even though we were quite far away at that point, the kick drum was just kind of pounding in this ear. If you imagine like a speaker blowing out, it kind of felt like my ear was going to do that. That was quite concerning, and I said to the guys, look, as soon as I'm done helping out here, I need to remove myself from any noise. So I did just that. I went and tried to find a quiet spot, which is pretty difficult at a festival when you've got multiple outdoor stages and lots of noise kicking around and people bustling about. But I managed to find a quiet-ish spot and just hung there until the band had played their show. Then we went back to where we were staying. We were there for a few more days before travelling back to England, and as soon as I got back I went to the doctors. They confirmed basically I think what I knew deep down. They looked inside my ear and said, yeah, you've burst your eardrum. They didn't actually tell me how bad a perforation it was, if my eardrum had fully blown out or if it was just a small perforation, which I'm kind of glad they didn't. I think that would have not helped in terms of me aiding the recovery process and keeping my stress and anxiety levels low. Sometimes I think actually knowing less, it can be a good thing. My first realization was like, okay, I need to cancel work here, because the doctor said to me, yeah, you can't be around any kind of loud noise right now. And they also recommended I try and keep my ear dry and not be in any like, I don't know, dusty environments or something where there'd be a lot of debris floating around that might get inside my inner ear, because of course when you've burst your eardrum and there's a hole there, your inner ear is exposed, which then means you're very prone to infection, which of course could then cause more long-term damage. I couldn't do any kind of live sound work and I couldn't really do any work in the studio. So when I got back to the UK a couple of days after I was meant to be out on a UK run of shows with another band, I had to cancel that. I had to cancel a bunch of other event work. I had to cancel some studio sessions. Luckily, I kind of landed on my feet. I managed to find some other work in a venue that were putting in some new PA equipment, and there was a bunch of cabling infrastructure and stuff to put in, which was great because I didn't have to fully rely on my savings. I was able to still do some work that didn't rely on me using my hearing, and I could keep my hearing protected. After about 3 weeks, I noticed one evening the sensation of fullness that had been in my ear ever since my eardrum burst, that had kind of gone. And then the next morning when I woke up, my ear felt completely normal. So I tried putting some earbuds in and listening to some music, and lo and behold, this ear, everything sounded normal, and this ear, everything sounded normal. So I kind of figured my eardrum must have healed. So I went back to the doctors and they looked inside my ear again and they said, no, it hasn't fully healed yet. It is healing, but there's still a bit of a perforation there. So it was kind of good and bad news at the same time. So it was a little disappointing to then be told that it hadn't, I wasn't fully out of the woods yet. They said to come back in X amount of time. I'm nearly at that point where I'll be due to go back to the doctors and see if it has healed fully. I think if it hasn't, enough time will have passed that they'll then start recommending me for surgery, which hopefully it doesn't come to that. And I'm in a weird position where I'm now, I'm back at work. I don't feel hindered at all in terms of my hearing. There's a few things I've noticed, like in the studio with my Kali In8s that I have as my main studio monitors. They're active monitors, and when you turn them up full, as is the case with I think most active monitors, they have a certain level of self-noise, so there's a little bit of hiss that you can hear mostly on the tweeter. And if I put my right ear kind of next to the tweeter, I can hear that hiss. It's a pretty low-level hiss, but if I put my left ear towards the tweeter, at first it's almost like I couldn't hear that hiss at all. And again, we're talking, very low-level hiss. But now I can hear it, but it's quieter than in this ear. So there's definitely some sort of imbalance there, which, to be honest, before my eardrum burst anyway, nobody's hearing is perfectly symmetrical, and mine definitely isn't. There's more of a dip in this ear in probably like your 2 to 3K range than there is in this ear, so maybe that has something to do with it. But I don't feel hindered at all. I feel when I listen to music, I can kind of hear everything. I can hear all the detail. I don't feel like I'm missing any information. And the same when I'm working, doing live sound or studio work, I don't feel hindered in any way. I don't feel like I'm missing anything sonically. So on the one hand, it kind of feels like things are back to normal and I'm fine, but at the same time, if it hasn't healed fully and it's not going to, what does that mean? Obviously it means I'm more prone to infection, which of course is a concern. It's kind of a weird one because I still feel like I'm able to work and I'm kind of back to normal. So it's almost easy in a way to sort of disregard it, but I know I need to keep going back to the doctors and do what I need. If I have to have surgery, then I need to follow things down that road. If I could take any positives from this whole situation, which I feel like is it's a healthy thing to do if you go through any kind of bad situation or injury in life, if you can try and put whatever positive spin you can on it, I feel like that's a healthy part of dealing with that and trying to heal. I feel like it afforded me a period of reflection where, I feel like I said earlier, it was my body's way of telling me to slow down and to maybe reassess a little and look at what I'm doing. It did get me thinking. If I had to walk away from working in music or just being involved in music, if I had to walk away from it tomorrow, how I would feel about that. And there was a time in my early 20s where all I wanted to do was have a career in music, and I couldn't see any other life for myself. I didn't see myself as being good at anything else or being capable of being good at anything else. Whereas now I came to realize this in going through this whole experience, that there are other things that I'd like to do in life. I'd quite like to work with animals. I've always been interested in doing something with video games, probably journalism within video games. Yeah, there's other stuff I'd like to do and I'd like to pursue. I think there's nothing wrong with the people who follow one career path their whole life. There's nothing wrong with that. That's totally fine. But also I feel like we are very driven into society, particularly with career paths, to be fixated on this idea of having one career path throughout our whole life. And actually, if you want to do something for a certain period of time and then try your hand at something else, like, there's nothing wrong with that either. And for me, that's quite an appealing idea. The idea of being put in a situation where I'm forced to walk away from it rather than reaching a natural point where I'd want to move on to something else. It's not such a bad idea. I'd feel like it was just that moving on had come a little earlier than expected. I'm okay with that. I try to look at things in those kind of terms and look at things as positively as I can. I think you're very lucky if you can manage to get through your entire life like completely unscathed. I don't think there's anyone really who does, both physically and mentally. We're all going to, throughout our lives, experience physical trauma, mental trauma, whatever it might be. There are going to be things that happen throughout our lives that are bad experiences, and they're going to be setbacks. We're going to have to learn how to deal with those things and try and heal and process. It was an unfortunate thing that happened, but it happened, and I've come out pretty lucky. I'm doing pretty well, so I have a lot to be thankful for and to be grateful for, and it's important to focus on that rather than focus on the negatives and dwell on that too much. So sound out in the comments below if you guys have been through anything similar, whether it's a burst eardrum or, just issues with your hearing, particularly if you work in music. I'd be interested to hear your stories and how you got through it and how you're doing now. I hope you enjoyed hearing my story and enjoyed the video, and I'll see you guys again in the next one. Give the video a like if you enjoyed it and subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you next time.